Michael, I'm going to start the video.
Hold on one second, Janine. I have to update one thing on the YouTube page.
Oh, okay.
It'll be just a second. Okay, the YouTube connection should be available for you now.
Okay. You got the message from Eileen, Michael?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, we're live. Go ahead, Courtney, take it down, please.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Joaquin Esquivel. I'm chair of the State Water Board. Today is Tuesday, February 2nd. It is 9 a.m. and I would like to call this meeting to order. I'll begin by introducing my fellow colleagues here this morning and staff. With us today is Board Member Tam Dodak, Board Member Laurel Firestone, and Board Member Sean McGuire. Additionally, joining us today is our Executive Director, Eileen Sobek, our two Chief Deputies, Eric Oppenheimer and Jonathan Bishop. Our Clerk of the Board is Janine Townsend. With us today as well is Michael Loffer, our Chief Counsel, and assisting Janine Townsend is Courtney Tyler. As you can see, today's meeting is being webcast and recorded and because of the COVID emergency, in order to comply with distancing requirements, we don't actually have a physical meeting room. Instead, we're here on the Zoom platform. And if you're looking to comment on any one of today's items or provide comment during public forum, you should be here on the Zoom platform with us. Otherwise, you're viewing us through one of two ways, the Cali PA webcast or the YouTube live web stream. If you're on one of those right now and you actually intend to comment on one of today's agenda items, you'll need to reach out to the clerk of the board. There's actually instructions at the top of today's agenda on how to do so, but you can also email comment letters at waterboards.ca.gov and be given a password and link to join us here on the Zoom platform. For those of you with us here on the platform already, you will be muted and your cameras will be turned off until it is time for you to speak during your item or during public forum, at which time your camera will be, you'll be allowed to show us your camera if you so choose, and otherwise be unmuted. With that out of the way, we can now move on to public forum. What I will note on today's public forum is we have at this point about 11 individuals. I usually give a 5-minute allotment for each speaker. Because we have 11, that would put us at somewhere around an hour before we would begin. So I would actually request if we can keep comments to about 3 minutes so as to be able to move through public forum this morning. But Mr. Leffler, make a comment.
Just before public forum began, I wanted to see Mr. Nelson has a hand raised, and he is one of the public forum speakers. So I was going to unmute his microphone and give him an opportunity to raise his issue.
Okay, great. Well, I think we can move on to that then. Mr. Nelson.
Thank you, Chair Esquivel. Barry Nelson with Golden State Salmon Association. Sorry, my video is not starting for some reason, but I want to make sure you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Barry Nelson representing Golden State.
Sorry, Mr. Nelson. I don't think I will call on you. I will take the public forum commenters in the order they were received here.
Okay,
so
fine.
We were just responding to your raised hand for a quick moment.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, and we can see your camera now as well. And so I think we have at the top here of public forum then first Sharon Briel. Good morning, Ms. Briel.
Good morning. Good morning, members of the board and meeting participants. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I am Sharon Briel, a resident of Bakersfield for the past 22 years and a member of the Kern-Cahuilla chapter of the Sierra Club. I am here today in support of the City of Bakersfield's application to receive 55,000 acre-feet of unallocated water. The city has indicated that the water will be returned to the lower portion of the Kern River. I believe it is critical for the river's health and the health of the environment, as well as the residents. When I arrived in Bakersfield in 2000, there was water in the lower portion of the river, and I was in love with it. Having come from Southern California, where the LA River is just a concrete channel with a little water and limited opportunities for recreation. I am thankful to the Kern River Parkway Foundation and the County of Kern for establishing a unique, nearly 50-mile bike walking path along the river. I ride my 26 miles nearly every day and see hundreds of people enjoying the out of doors. Having water in the lower Kern for even some amount of time would be healing for our community. As I said, hundreds of people flock to Hart Park and the Riverwalk Park because there is water from the Kern River there. These areas provide very important recreation opportunities, especially it provides recreation without a lot of cost to families. I'm very concerned that we have a recreation inequality. Today's families would have difficulty going to Disneyland or other venues because of the high cost, but they can enjoy the river and receive the peace of mind that comes along with being in nature. Our community has grown substantially in the past 22 years. While I was the food service director for the Kern High School District, with 35,000 students at the time, the district had built 5 new high schools to accommodate the growth. However, over 65% of the student body qualified for the school lunch program due to the family's income status. Recreation and connection with nature is critical to the health of children. Putting water back into the lower Kern River is a way to support children and families. In closing, please support the application from the City of Bakersfield for the 55,000 acre-feet of unallocated water to be returned to the Kern River. Thank you for the time to let me share my thoughts.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts with the board this morning, Ms. Briel. Thank you. Thank you for your time. Next, we have William Martin.
Thank you. My name is Bill Martin. I am a San Francisco resident and a volunteer activist with the Sierra Club San Francisco Bay Chapter Water Committee. I am also a longtime kayaker and recreational fisherman in the Delta. I strongly support higher flows throughout the Bay Delta estuary. All of the best available science points to one crucial fact: higher flows are necessary to restore the estuary's health. Your own scientists noted that 60% of unimpaired flows are necessary at a minimum. Yet your own final plan from December 2018 mandated 30 to 50% unimpaired flows in the three main tributaries of the San Joaquin River. In the 2+ years since that directive, the estuary has only gotten worse. One area in particular that has gotten worse is harmful algal blooms. This problem was highlighted by board member Laurel Firestone in her presentation to the California Law Symposium on January 30th, 2021. Harmful algal blooms have spread throughout the Delta and now occur at all times of the year. Fish species continue to disappear. The latest survey found 0 Delta smelt. Other fish species have experienced similar declines, certainly including salmon, but even non-natives, such as striped bass, have declined precipitously. Yet you've done nothing. You claim to be allowing voluntary agreements to take effect. However, on the Tuolumne River, the proposed voluntary agreement among the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission and the Modesto and Turlock irrigation districts is, for all practical purposes, dead. Why? Because a peer review of their salmon and steelhead models showed them to be so flawed as to be useless. And these models are the very basis for the voluntary agreement success. It's time to act. Implement the Bay Delta Water Quality Plan update of December 2018 now. Thank you.
Thank you as well, Mr. Martin. Thank you for your time. Next, we have Heinrich Albert. Good morning, Mr. Albert.
Hi there. I'm trying to speak through my phone.
Oh, okay. Well, I believe we can hear you at this moment. So I think you should be able to provide your comment.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you. So my name's Heinrich Albert. I live in rural El Dorado County. I too want to speak today on the update of the Bay Delta Water Quality Plan. I want to start by offering my heartfelt thanks to Director Dudak, who I understand is not seeking reappointment. Director, you've been really a positive member of this board. I really appreciate all the hard work that you've done, and you're going to be sorely missed. Now, I appreciate the work that the board did through the end of 2018, but since then, waiting for the voluntary agreements has not been productive. Conditions in the tributaries, the Delta and the Bay Estuary continue to deteriorate as evidenced by recent fall and winter trawls, and there's much other evidence also. Now, we in the public, we don't hear very much about the voluntary agreement process, but the little bits we do hear often focus on habitat improvements. Now, no one opposes those habitat improvements, but habitat is not the limiting factor. It's clearly freshwater flows. Many times in many of our rivers and through the estuary, it is freshwater flows, inadequate freshwater flows, that limits the recovery of our fish populations and these environments in general. I've seen no signs, no public signs at least, from this any of the voluntary agreement processes for proposals of flows that even approach adequate levels. So I want to just reinforce what the previous speaker said and urge the board to do the work that all Californians are depending on you for, and that is to protect the public trust of our rivers that feed the Delta itself, and the downstream estuary. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Albert. Much appreciated this morning. Next, we have Brandon Dawson.
Good morning, board members. Brandon Dawson with SWRCB, California. I believe this is my first time speaking for you all this year, so Happy New Year. I want to reiterate some of the points that the two speakers previously before me, especially my volunteer, Bill Martin. He spoke very eloquently and much more eloquently than I could, so thank you, Bill. But basically, I'm urging you to restart the state board process to set and implement Bay Delta water quality control standards and restore Central Valley rivers as well as the Sacramento rivers for our salmon and fish species. It's been over 2 years at this point since you all adopted the Bay Delta Water Quality Control Plan, and we've seen little success in terms of the water restoration efforts and habitat restoration efforts that have been taking place there. This has resulted in decreased flows, but also, as Board Member Firestone mentioned, like this past weekend at the Water Law Symposium, harmful algal blooms are proliferating vociferously throughout the waterways in the Delta. This is causing impairment for not only fish species, but also bird species, as well as local communities there that depend and use the Delta for drinking water, but also for recreation. As we know, a lot of the communities in the Delta are legacy communities and low-income communities, as well as communities of color. And so to do justice by them, I really urge you to make sure that you're thinking consciously about implementing the Bay Delta Water Quality Control Plan, but also urgently as well. So thank you, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Mr. Dawson. Thank you for your time. Next, we have Maritza Alvarez. Good morning.
I'm trying to make sure I am unmuted.
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Good morning, Piali Nanotaka, Maritza Alvarez, and I am of Yaqui Cochimi Wisharika indigenous descent. And I'm with Sacred Places Institute for Indigenous Peoples. We're an indigenous-led community-based organization located in the ancestral homelands of the Tongva people here in Los Angeles. Now, what we do is we advocate for environmental, social, and cultural justice, and we work locally, regionally, and globally to help build the capacity of Native nations and indigenous peoples, specifically to help protect sacred lands, waters, and cultures. And so we are participating in this public comment with great concern, as many of your individuals that have called in have expressed. It is really unthinkable that it's been 2 years and still there hasn't been any movement to ensure that the rivers are flowing back into the Delta and going downstream. And it's a great concern because not only are we are concerned about the natural life that are part of that force of that river, but as well the communities that have a reciprocal relationship with that river. So we are advocating that the board please move on this. We've waited too long, and we are in a situation where more than ever we need to do our part in ensuring that our waters and our lands are back in balance. And we have absolutely no time to waste. So I urge you all, please get up off your seats and start working on that. We all depend on that, whether you may not think that you do directly, and I don't mean you, I mean everyone. Whether we do not think we depend on that directly, we absolutely do. So we urge you here at SPI to take action, waste no more time, and ensure that those rivers begin to flow and that the Delta is once again flowing and life is thriving once again. So on behalf of Sacred Places Indigenous Institute, I thank you and everyone for making that effort, and we will make sure to remind you all to please do the work. Thank you very much. Tlaxcamati.
Thank you, Ms. Alvarez. Next, we have Cindy Charles.
Good morning. I'm Cindy Charles, Conservation Chair for the Golden West Twin Fly Fishers and board member of the Tuolumne River Trust and the California Sport Fishing Protection Alliance. I'm speaking the years past on the lower Tuolumne, where I once saw much higher numbers of salmon, steelhead, and resident trout than we see today. I have stopped fishing there because of the lack of sufficient flows that has so negatively impacted the fish populations. This season's fall run, Chinook run on the Tuolumne are slightly above 1,000 and are probably largely hatchery strays from elsewhere. This extremely degraded situation has been going on far too long. It is time for you to get back to work to restart the state board process to set and implement Bay Delta flow standards. The old and totally inadequate flow standards are the driver of the collapse of the Bay Delta fish species. The inadequate flows are a major reason why the lower Tuolumne fish populations are still barely hanging on. The talks to produce a voluntary agreement have dragged on for 2 years and have failed. The dream of a voluntary agreement is just not happening. The VA path seems to have been a strategy to encourage you to continue to delay. I urge you to please take action now on what the science has been telling us and implement the long overdue and desperately needed new Bay Delta flow standards. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time this morning, Ms. Charles. Much appreciated. Next, we have Norma Wallace. I'm sorry, Ms. Wallace, you're cutting up a bit. Perhaps try now.
Alship kam kanak chochenyo kanak rakat norma ekrua rote wichan awashte. Thank you all. I am Ohlone. My name is Norma Wallace. My home is located in Richmond. I urge you to restart the state board process to set and implement Bay Delta flow standards. It is time. My ancestors, including Miwok and Ohlone, have a several thousand-year history in California. Several thousand years, barely a footprint remained. Yet now, not 200 years after the gold rush and flood of settlers to California, we count fish by the individual instead of by the hundreds of thousands. In landmark book Tending the Wild, M. Cat Anderson quotes C.A. Kirkpatrick. In 1849, they had no trouble whatever procuring all the salmon they wished, and that by just constructing a rude barb or spear and wading out a few steps, they can literally pick up all there. In 1944, an estimated 130,000 salmon spawned in the Tuolumne. In 2020, the number dropped to 1,050. Salmon are an essential part of river ecology and an indication of the health of the broad ecosystem. Salmon's decimated populations should give us all pause and make us reconsider how to move forward. To increase their population, peer-reviewed science says they need 60% unimpaired water flow. I urge you to restart the state board process to set and implement Bay Delta flow standards. The fish cannot wait any longer. It is time. As our new president said, a cry for survival comes from the planet itself, a cry that can't be any more desperate or any more clear. Thank you very much. Ashib Ek.
Thank you so much, Ms. Wallace. Greatly appreciate the time this morning. Next, we have Peter Dreckmeyer.
Good morning, Chair Esquivel and board members. Peter Dreckmeyer, I'm the Policy Director for the Tuolumne River Trust. It's nice to see you all. It's been a while. So more than 2 years have passed since phase 1 of the Bay Delta Plan was adopted, and yet very little progress is made toward implementing the plan. And meanwhile, the Bay Delta ecosystem is in crisis. So it's time to face the fact that the voluntary agreements have been a distraction and have stalled the progress. We need to move on with the Bay Delta Plan. Regarding the peer review commissioned by NIMFS and done by Anchor QEA, it concluded that the irrigation district's fish models simply compare alternatives and are not very useful for informing how the Tuolumne River Management Plan, upon which the VA is based, improves long-term abundance of fish. To this, the irrigation districts responded, and this is in quotes, "Results from these models are intended to be used to investigate the relative extent to which abundances of juvenile Chinook salmon and multiple life stages of Omicus are influenced by in-river factors and conditions. The models were never intended to serve as a 50-year resource management tool for use by NIMS or other parties responsible for managing regional fisheries." This should be a major red flag for the Water Board, as you have a legal obligation to restore fish populations. What's acceptable to FERC is different than what's necessary to meet your mandate. What the TRVA does is it crams species and different life cycles all into the main channel where there's over-competition and predation. It produces very little new water, mostly focuses on better timing of spill, which is something that should have been done for decades to protect the species below their dams. And it'll do little to enhance delta inflow and outflow. It's basically just a checklist. The water agencies will say, well, we did everything we committed to, sorry, it didn't work. What we really need is the adaptive management plan in the Bay Delta plan, which has a range of 30 to 50%. If biological goals and objectives are being met, it could be down to 30. If they're not being met, it could go up to 50%. We know that water is the key ingredient here. So thank you for your attention. And I also want to thank Board Member Doduk for your incredible service. You have been wonderful and we're really going to miss you. And I want to thank you all for serving us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dreckmeyer, and thank you for your thanks. Next, we have Gail Sridanovic.
I'm unmuted, right?
Yes, you are. Good morning.
Hi. Yes, yes, I'm Gail Sridanovic. I'm co-chair of the Social Justice Task Force of San Mateo County. Oh, start video. Let's try this. Oh, there we go.
Good morning.
Sorry about the lighting. My print is, I'm reading a faint print. I'm a co-chair of the Social Justice Task Force of San Mateo County Democracy for America, a native Californian and a resident of Menlo Park. San Mateo County Democracy for America has taken a position in favor of improving flows into the Delta estuary as recommended by science, and they are against unsustainable exports to the Central Valley, basically. Bay Area residents care about sustainability and have demonstrated the willingness and the ability to reduce water use even during periods of rising employment. I myself have installed a gravel pit to retain water on my property, as well as low flow toilets, and have taken out my front lawn entirely. Humans have often made poor decisions about use of our resources, from extinction of species to proposals to fill in San Francisco Bay to pollution of our air and waterways. I actually remember, and you probably weren't around, when the Bayshore used to smell absolutely dreadful. And when we had periods where a greenish haze that was not due to forest fires hung over the Bay Area during extended periods. Fortunately, some good decisions have led to improvements. However, we live with a pathetic record of declining fish stocks that closely mirrors declines in water flow. Sadly, in addition, Delta residents now live with toxic algae that grow when flows are inadequate. Throughout our discussions, we must remember something not widely reported, namely that present allocations to Central Valley water districts are largely the result of secret backroom meetings. This is well documented in the Public Citizen Report entitled Water Heist, available online. I recommend this to you. The result of these meetings has been water allocations that exceed the amount of water that ever exists in the system. I urge the State Water Board to exercise its authority on behalf of California residents who care deeply about our environment and not to be misled by unscientific projections. We need you to move forward with the Bay Delta Water Quality Plan. And I thank you for your time and your service.
Thank you as well, Mr. Yudanovic, for your advocacy and your time this morning. Thank you. Next, we have Julianne Frise.
Good morning. It's actually Frizzell, but that's
Giselle, sorry.
it's all right. It's a tough one.
Good morning to you.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. And I also, oh, sorry, I have a little message that, okay. I also support the State Water Board Delta Water Quality Control Plan. That's a mouthful. And this plan took years to develop with input from many interest groups and scientists. I testified on behalf of the plan in 2018 in Sacramento, drove up very early in the morning, and I'm very disappointed that the board hasn't made more progress in implementing the plan since that year. Unfortunately, my water purveyor, the San Francisco Public Utility Commission, has also been standing in the way of implementing the Bay Delta Plan and the Bay Delta flow standards. Your foot dragging and the SFPUC opposition is out of sync with the science and the will of the people of the Bay Area. I'm a resident of Palo Alto, and I'm also a landscape architect. Over the last decade in the landscape industry, there have been great strides in designing and installing more efficient irrigation systems and designing private, public, and commercial gardens that use considerably less irrigation water than a decade ago. There's also been water use reduction inside homes, in businesses, and public buildings. Although there has been population and job growth in the Bay Area these past 10 years, water use has gone down an average of more than 12%. In the Bay Area, as has been noted by other speakers, we save water because we care about our California environment, and we don't want the source of that water, our water, the San Joaquin Tuolumne ecosystem, to collapse. Please stop wasting time and stop endangering our precious ecosystem. I feel that we are doing our part as residents and professionals to save water, but I wish you would all do your part and implement the Bay Delta flow standards. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your time and advocacy this morning. Next, now we have Barry Nelson. Mr. Nelson, good morning.
Thank you, Chair Esquivel and board members. Barry Nelson on behalf of the Golden State Salmon Association, representing California's recreational, commercial salmon fishing industries and other aspects of that industry. As in the case of the other speakers speaking today, to urge the board to restart both phase 1 and phase 2 of the Bay Delta Plan update process, and to agendize that discussion for the board so you can get an update about what's happening and present to the public a detailed plan for moving forward as rapidly as possible. I won't repeat the points of some previous speakers regarding harmful algal blooms, risks of extinction, and overall ecosystem decline. I will point out that in the last 25 years, as the current standards have been in place, salmon runs, commercially important salmon runs, and the salmon fishing industry have declined catastrophically. The number of fishing jobs is declining. We were shut down entirely 2008 to 2009. We're losing salmon fishing jobs. The science shows that all of the aspects of this decline are overwhelmingly driven by inadequate flow in the rivers and estuary. The board is the only agency with the authority and the responsibility to protect all of these beneficial uses, including thousands, tens of thousands of California salmon fishing jobs, fishing related jobs when that's a healthy ecosystem. The current standards are 25 years old. We all know that those standards are inadequate. But I want to just take a moment to talk about the history of the voluntary agreement process. The board has been waiting for 2 years for voluntary agreements. That voluntary agreement process, if there is one, and there really isn't today, has had 10 years to produce results since the board released its flow evaluation report in 2010. In 2015, Secretary Laird told the board that there would be final voluntary agreements by 2016, the end of 2016. You were then told that you would have a final package by the end of 2018. You were presented with an outline, not a VA package. The state presented a framework earlier in 2020. And frankly, all of those sketchy outlines have collapsed. There are no ongoing discussions for a comprehensive VA process. Those efforts have simply collapsed. Another speaker mentioned the peer review of one of those upstream voluntary agreement proposals on the Tuolumne River. And that peer review demonstrated that that proposal simply does not have a credible scientific foundation as the law requires. It is painfully clear that those talks have collapsed and that the VA process has become a strategy for delay rather than a serious effort to produce solutions for the Bay Delta. It is painfully ironic that today is Groundhog Day, because we have for a decade been hearing that voluntary agreements are right around the corner and they will solve our problems if only the board will continue to delay. It's time to recognize that strategy for what it is. We urge you to agendize this item as soon as possible. The state prizes its role as an environmental leader, and frankly, that leadership is dramatically undercut as the board has waited for 2 years before moving forward. As an ecosystem is collapsing, as we're seeing extinctions play out in front of us, and as we lose jobs that are dependent, fishing-related jobs dependent on a healthy ecosystem, we urge you to agendize this item and move forward as rapidly as possible. Thank you so much.
Thank you as well for your time this morning, Mr. Nelson. Next, we have Rachel Zwillinger.
Sorry, I don't understand.
Don't mind the Google responding to me.
Good morning. I'm Rachel Zwillinger with Defenders of Wildlife, and I'm also here today to ask you to move forward expeditiously with the second phase of the Bay Delta Plan update. When I last stood before you regarding the plan update, I was 8 months pregnant with my youngest child. The little guy will turn 2 later this month. He's learned to walk and talk and has mastered the art of interrupting conference calls. The board, on the other hand, has made no perceptible progress on the plan update. I'm deeply concerned that when he's getting ready for kindergarten in 3 years, the board will still be working on the plan update. And at that point, I fear I'll be telling him about Delta smelt, winter run Chinook salmon, and other species using the past tense. You have the power to change the trajectory for the Bay Delta, to move from declining wildlife, toxic algae blooms, and struggling fishing communities towards a vibrant and healthy estuary. And yet you wait. The likelihood of someone making the job easier for you by dropping an adequate voluntary agreement in your lap within the next year is vanishingly small. Rather than waiting and watching the estuary continue to decline, I'm here to ask you to act. Have a workshop, set a concrete timeline, release a draft for all to see. Start making progress before there's nothing left to save. Thanks for your time this morning.
Thank you, Ms. Zwillinger. Much appreciated. Next, we have Holly Cardoza.
Got my video on. All right.
Morning.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. My name is Holly Irene Cardoza. I'm a citizen of California. I live in Petaluma, California, which is Coast Miwok land. The Coast Miwok are the rightful stewards of that land. I am speaking today. I'm a member, active member. I'm an artist, I'm an educator, and I am an activist. I am an active member of Run for Salmon. We are taught in Run for Salmon to speak for the salmon because the salmon cannot speak because they gave us their voice. I am urging you to restart the process to restore adequate flow in the Bay and the Delta. Our ecosystem is in crisis. We really cannot ignore this any longer, all right? There is 0% Delta smelt right now for the 3rd year in a row. What are we going to do about that? California is supposed to be a salmon state. Are we really a salmon state right now? Doesn't seem like it. It's very, very sad what's happened to our salmon, and they need to be restored. And if you don't think that the salmon is affecting the orca population, I would rethink that. There is a butterfly effect happening right now, okay? We really need to stop putting profit above the environment. We need to do the right thing. And this is not going to be very well accepted by a lot of people who have been profiting for the wrong reasons for a very long time. But let me tell you something, the internet has changed things. People now are being watched. We're all being watched. All these policies and these laws that have been sneaking through for many, many years, all that's going to stop now. You see, because we're all being held accountable for our actions and for our non-actions. It's very, very important that we understand that. Have a few notes here. I would like for the board to really listen to the Native people of California. The Native people of California have solutions. They know this land. For instance, Chief Kayleen Sisk of the Winnemem Wintu tribe knows a lot about this land. Have you invited her to the table? Have you invited her to speak? Do you know anything that she knows? Because let me tell you, she comes from an oral tradition of thousands upon thousands upon thousands of years that people still do not want to admit that that heritage that she has come from exists. Okay? Please listen to the Native people. Bring them to the table. Listen to what they have to say. It is extremely, extremely important. Stop diverting the water. Come on, guys. Please, let's do the right thing. I stand with Native people. I stand for the environment. I stand for the animals. I stand for the fish. I stand for the flying ones. But also I stand for us, because we are part of the ecosystem. And if we have no ecosystem, there is no us. Okay, we need to do the right thing, and it might hurt people's wallets. It might hurt people's bottom line and their feelings. Sorry, it's time to do the right thing. Thank you for letting me speak today. Have a good one.
Thank you for your time this morning, Ms. Cardoza. Much appreciated. Next, we have Michael Frost. Mr. Frost, you should be invited to unmute and or share your camera here in a moment.
I'm on the phone today. This is Michael Frost. I'm on the board of Restore the Delta.
Yes, good morning. We can hear you now.
All right, great. Well, thank you for the time. And I want to urge you to restart the state board process to set and implement Bay Delta flow standards for all the reasons that have been discussed. But I want to step back a little bit, think, how did we get here? In 2021, we're still using 20th century assumptions that were bad when they were made, 19th to 20th century assumptions. And they were bad assumptions back then, but the natural capital glass was full during those centuries and decades. And people were able to continue pillaging the environment over and over and over again. It was the late 20th century into this century when we've experienced complete collapse. And I feel like public policy is akin to a suicide pact, right? We're just going to pillage this thing to the very last minute, and then we're all going to go up in smoke together. And I'm sure you noticed that last year, the entire state of California was on fire. The entire continent of Australia was on fire. Amazon rainforest was on fire. The Siberian tundra was on fire. And what does it have to do with water flows? It has quite a bit to do with water flows. Diverting water out of the tributaries, diverting water out of the delta, and starving the ocean of that freshwater flow is killing us and everything around us. And if we want to have a cascading effects of environmentally beneficial results, we can let more fresh water flow through the rivers, all the way through the delta, all the way out into the ocean. A region that cannot support native fish cannot support people. I don't want to go up in smoke with everybody else. Please, again, restart the state board process to set and implement Bay Delta flow standards.
Thank you. Thank you for your time this morning.
One last point. There's been a lot of businesses that have they take 1 unit of water and they turn that into a unit of money. Those people will never, ever, ever quit. We're relying on you to represent us and the ecosystem services that produces everything for us, to just say, no, you can't do that anymore. Those are 19th and 20th century assumptions that don't jive today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Frost. Next, we have Barbara Berrigan-Perea.
Good morning, board. Barbara Berrigan-Perea with Restore the Delta. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. We originally had planned to bring our youth with our colleagues to speak this morning, but they are working on a massive project. They're going to be leading discussions this Thursday on the climate vulnerability assessment with the Delta Stewardship Council. And the reason we're focusing on this report is because it actually ties to a great degree in with what is happening with the voluntary agreements versus finishing the Bay Delta plan. We hope that you can maybe join this meeting on Thursday and you can learn about their support for the urgency of a restart of the Bay Delta plan. Our plan is also that in a couple of weeks, our youth will be joining your public forum at another board meeting. Before I continue, though, I also want to thank board member Dodek for her years of thoughtful, factual, and fair leadership. And the same to all of you. It's tough to be in the position you are with competing interests in our current political climate. And we understand that at Restore the Delta. But for us, it doesn't change the sense of urgency. Like our friend from Defenders was talking about her son growing up during the time that we've been waiting for the restart of the Bay Delta plan, moving forward, implementation. We used to have a time clock up on our Restore the Delta website from about the beginning of 2017 through the end of 2018, where we were counting the hours and days and seconds for you to initially move forward and get the planning done. Sadly, we're about ready to dust off that time clock again and put it back up. The way we see it, especially when you look at that you look at the vulnerability assessment for the DSC, we're looking at flows coming into the Delta that will be reduced in half with the impacts of climate change in the decades to come. That means water resources are going to become more scarce. And of course, the scarcer the resources, the greater the infighting. If you wait much longer, people will just become more and more recalcitrant and dig deeper into their positions instead of trying to get to a solution that will actually save and restore the estuary. HABs are not something we can skim over at Restore the Delta because other people have mentioned them. The conditions for the creation of HABs throughout San Joaquin County and the entire Delta are worsening. Last year was worse than the year before. They are starting earlier because we have warmer air temperatures, warmer water temperatures. I could go on and on. We are an AB 617 community in San Joaquin County. HABs are significant asthma triggers. It's an economic justice issue for you. We can't have meaningful waterfront redevelopment. We have homeless residents who are living all over adjacent to these HABs areas. It's hampered business development at the port, which needs help in cleaning up its own act so it can expand green business. But in the meanwhile, they almost lost a significant contract with a significant business this year because of HABs conditions. We know that the cure is going to be flows to a part as well as water cleanup. But it was really interesting at the Independent Science Board for the Delta Stewardship Council, scientists were making policy recommendations that the only way that problem was going to be tackled is really for enforcement on water quality. First, I was a little surprised that scientists were actually making policy recommendations instead of just reporting out the science. But their belief was that the issue of flows into the Delta was never going to be solved by this body. So my hope is you prove them wrong. My hope is that we get moving again. We actually set enforceable standards that would actually help restore the estuary and protect the people who live here. I thank you for your time. Be safe.
Chair Esquivel, you're on mute.
Thank you. You know, in the almost year now that we've been doing this, I think it's one of the first times I've been unmuted. Anyway, thank you, Barbara. Much appreciated. And next we have Karen Harwell.
Good morning and grateful to be here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, all right. I would like to just speak to the opportunity that is before us to expand our responsibility from a limited sense of responsibility to a more holistic responsibility. Our responsibility needs at this time to expand beyond being users of water, managers of water, to a need to expand beyond all of these and see ourselves as really supporting that water is necessary for all life, not just ours. And I would like to see actual implementation of the Bay Delta Plan, because with all the research that's been done, that is what is required. And so that we can be caring for the whole system of that precious water in the lives of all life. So please, please consider implementing that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you as well for your time this morning, Ms. Harwell. And last here for public forum, we have Regina Chichizola.
Hi, thank you for having me here today, and I'm glad I got up before my kid on Zoom. I'm Regina Chichizola from Save California Salmon, and I also work with the Pacific Coast Federation of Fishermen's Associations. I'm calling today from Klamath, California, so if you can't hear me, please let me know because there's very poor internet here on the Yurok Reservation. I'm calling for several reasons. The main one is obviously to also urge you to restart the process, the phase 2 process for the Bay Delta. I feel like it is critical that we act now because the Delta smelt and many of the fish species in the Delta are going down really quickly. Also, I feel the need to say that coastal fishing communities are being very hurt right now, and at a time when we're having such economic hardship because of COVID-19, it's really important that people have access to the food and the jobs that fish provide. And I also wanted to say that, I want to give thanks for all the work that this board has done to recognize the human right to water and to make sure that groundwater is being cleaned up. But we also have to realize that a lot of the state's drinking water comes from the Delta. And right now we're dealing with like toxic algae problems, chemical problems and things, and the need to take water from other places in the state in order to add it to the Delta for water quality so that water available to the people of California. And we really can't go on like this for much longer. So that's one of the reasons why I'm asking you to restart the process. I also wanted to mention that why the voluntary agreements have been stalled, plans for things like new reservoirs, like the Sites Reservoir on the Sacramento River near the Bay Delta, are moving forward. And the Delta tunnels are moving forward. And meanwhile, we don't even know what the water supply for those things can be. So I feel like not only is it necessary for so many other reasons for this process to move forward, but also so that the state can move forward with its water planning and actually looking at where water is needed and not needed. If you allow something like Sites Reservoir to move forward, where they're planning to take the extra water, which is the water that you're talking about in this process, this winter and spring flows, then how are they even to know how much water or whether or not this is an economical decision to move forward with things like the Delta tunnels and the Sites Reservoir? I also wanted to mention that while the state's moving forward with the Truth and Healing Council for Native people, it's important to look at what Native people have available for their food sources and for their water quality, because for a lot of Native people, fish and water are everything to them. And right now, for people like the Winnemem-Wintu tribal leaders to have ceremony, a lot of times we have to bring salmon from the Klamath River. And the Klamath River also has crazy flow issues. I mean, David Bernhard just said that there no longer has to be water for endangered species at all in the Klamath River or for tribal trust. And that's going to take a while to figure out how to deal with that. And we also have the Trinity River being diverted out of the Klamath River into the Sacramento at times when water is needed for water quality in the Sacramento system and the Bay Delta. So there are so many things in the balance here: food for people, jobs for fishermen, fish for ceremonies for Native people, justice, drinking water. There is so many reasons that we need this to move forward. I mean, also Wall Street is starting to trade water, and we need to make sure that the job of this board is done, and that job is to protect the public trust, to figure out the water needs of the people of California, to protect our drinking water, and it's not to protect voluntary agreements and voluntary settlements and to make sure that corporations and farmers have water. It's to make sure that the water is fishable and drinkable, and that people's jobs and livelihoods and cultures are protected. So please move forward with this process. Thank you so much for hearing me. I very much miss seeing you all in person, and I hope to work with you on this process in the future.
Thank you, Ms. Triggery. Appreciate your time this morning, and I appreciate everyone's time. I think all 17 commenters that we ended up having this morning for public forum. We obviously at the board take our work of balancing the needs amongst all water users and beneficial uses in the state very seriously. The Bay Delta Water Quality Control Plan update is a decadal, significant effort that we're still in the middle of. So we look forward to continuing to engage around all the work and appreciate everyone's thoughts and time this morning and continued advocacy. So thank you. With that, we are done now with public forum then. And let me quickly pull up my calendar. We can move on to actual board business. And the first item up is, yes, board consideration of minute adoption for the January 19th and 20th board meeting minutes. And with that, I'll entertain a motion.
Move for adoption of the minutes.
I'll second.
Thank you. Ms. Townsend, can you please call the roll call vote?
Certainly. Board Member Dodek?
Aye.
Board Member Firestone?
Aye.
Board Member McGuire?
Aye.
And Chair Esquivel?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you as well. So with informational item number 2, we don't actually have an update. We've left it on here as a standing informational item in case there's anything to convey. And there's not. Just 2 weeks ago, you all recall, we released our survey data. We're in the thick of trying to have discussions and figure out what our next steps are there. So we appreciate everyone's engagement and continued opportunity to talk about how we see this arrearages and household debt challenge. And we'll have more to speak certainly in the weeks and time ahead as we work with the administration and the legislature. Next, we have uncontested item number 3. Mr. Lawford flagged that we actually don't have comments as well for item number 4, so it's technically uncontested, but we have a light schedule today, so we can go ahead and keep it on the calendar for, or rather keep it off the uncontested list and have a presentation and briefing from the staff on it. Or if any of the board members wish, could lump it into number 3 if we wanted to get those two done with now. So with all of that, I'll either take a motion on contested item number 3 or 3 and 4, seeing as how we don't currently have any comments for 4, but glad to take the time and actually go through item number 4 as well.
I am happy to move both of them. I feel strongly in support of both of them. I really appreciate the movement on, moving through a lot of the regulatory program or adoptions that we need to do within the drinking water program. I know we have a very long list, and this is great progress on the revised total coliform rule. And I'm really thankful for staff's work on at Division of Financial Assistance in going through and continuing to look for opportunities to make our funding go even further and kind of address the many critical needs. So I would support moving both of them, but interested in other board members, of course.
Yeah, Mr. Lawford, do you have some?
The only thing that I would ask is that we invite Ms. Tosny to speak and let us know whether there are any concerns if the item were to be moved without discussion, if there were any last minute changes staff wanted to make. So I'm inviting her into the discussion at this point. Otherwise, the board members can continue their discussion. Ms. Tosny.
We don't have any other last minute changes. It's all posted with the agenda.
Great.
Terrific.
And
So it will be the board's pleasure then.
Thank you. And on that note, I will second Board Member Firestone's motion, as well as her remarks and her thanks to all the staff, all the stakeholders for their work on these 2 critical items, and let them go back and continue their work on implementation.
Thank you both. And so, Ms. Townsend, can you please call the roll call vote?
Certainly. Board Member Firestone.
Aye.
Board Member Dodick.
Aye.
Board Member McGuire.
Aye.
And Chair Esquivel.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you as well. And again, incredible work. I really appreciated both of the briefings around these items, and particularly, again, the really great work coming out of the Division of Financial Assistance. Megan, Ms. Tonsley, your unit, your work continues to do, incredible work here. Particularly, just we have quite the complement of various pots and funds, and continuing to deliver them effectively to communities without them having to figure out, well, which pot do I need to apply for? But us doing the work here to really clean up guidelines and make clear has been just great. So thank you. So that brings us to then our next informational item, which is a quarterly Delta Stewardship Council Lead Scientist Report. And to kick us off here, we have our Delta Water Master, Mr. Michael George. Good morning. Good to see you.
Good morning, Chair Esquivel and members of the board. I'm Michael George. I'm pleased to be here this morning. As Delta Water Master, I report jointly to the State Water Resources Control Board and the Delta Stewardship Council. So my role today is only as the internal water board sponsor for the quarterly report of the Delta lead scientist. And I think we're all eager to give you a report today because there's a lot of developments that are worth discussing. And so without any further ado, Courtney, if you'd pull up the presentation, I'll turn it over to the Delta lead scientist, Dr. Laurel Larson.
So good to see you, Dr. Larson. Are you here stateside with us now?
I am. I'm reporting in from my home in Sacramento, so it's good to finally be on Pacific time zone. So
good to have you here.
Chair Esquivel, and thank you, Michael George. I have quite a bit to report on today, as Michael indicated. Next slide, please. I'll just give you a preview of where I'm going to go with this report. So the first item on the agenda for the Delta Lead Scientist Report is a briefing on the Delta Adapts Climate Change Vulnerability Assessment, which was just released by the Planning Division of the Delta Stewardship Council on the 15th of January. This document is available for public comment until March 16th. And so in a moment, I'm going to introduce the Assistant Planning Director, Harriet Ross, who will give you an overview of this document. But just briefly, after that, I'm going to report out on the Independent Science Board's status and work plan for 2021. I will also report on activities that are ongoing with respect to the Science Action Agenda, proposal solicitation, state of Bay Delta science, upcoming meetings and workshops, and mention some efforts occurring within the Delta Stewardship Council to integrate social science research more fully into the Delta Science enterprise. If time permits, at the end of this, I will spotlight an article that I think would be of interest to the Water Board, but we will hold that off until a future report if we do run out of time. So with that, without further ado, I would like to introduce, next slide, please. I would like to introduce Harriet Ross, who is the Assistant Planning Director of the Delta Stewardship Council, who will give us an overview of the vulnerability assessment.
Thank you, Laurel. Can you all hear me? Good? Great. Okay, well, good morning, Chair Esquivel and members of the board. Thank you for giving me the opportunity today to share our work on the Council's climate change study, Delta Adapts. If we can advance the slide, please, to one more. Delta Adapts is the first comprehensive climate change study that covers the entire Delta and Sassoon Marsh, and it consists of both a vulnerability assessment and an adaptation strategy. As Laurel mentioned, we just released the public draft of the vulnerability assessment a couple weeks ago, and we're now in the middle of our 60-day review period. The overarching goal of Delta Adapts is to build climate resilience in the Delta. Next slide, please. The specific goals of Delta Adapts are to inform the future work at the Council, help the state prioritize future actions and investments, provide a toolkit of information for local governments to use in their regulatory documents, and to serve as a framework to be built upon by the Council and others in the future. Delta Adapts, next slide please, is a regional study. We cover a large area that the entire Delta and Sassoon Marsh consistent with our regulatory authority, and it is a planning level study designed to inform policy. So a lot of other climate assessments have been done by state agencies and individual cities and counties in the Delta, but these typically focus on assets those agencies own or analyze vulnerabilities based on a certain set of conditions. And Delta Adapts is different in that it covers a broad range of asset types and climate change conditions and is designed to be complementary with all of these other efforts out there. Next slide. Our study does look at a range of climate stressors and hazards, including changes in air temperatures, precipitation, and sea level rise. And we also analyze vulnerabilities related to extreme heat, wildfire, drought, and flooding. Next slide. We went through an extensive community engagement process in the last 2 years. We have a technical advisory group, which consists of experts in the system and in climate change. The Delta Water Master was on our technical advisory committee and provided input on our technical approach and analyses, as well as data for our work. We also had ongoing collaboration with many of our agency partners. We built off of existing models and data created by our partners and worked extensively to ensure the future flood studies coming from the state are generally consistent. We also had a series of stakeholder briefings. I think the last count was at 72, where we met with stakeholders to ground truth our data and verify our results. We also briefed water board staff back in late last fall on their preliminary findings on flooding, water supply, and the ecosystem analyses. We've also launched a significant effort to outreach to community-based organizations who helped us structure our engagement to reach the vulnerable communities in the Delta. And lastly, we do also have a stakeholder work group consisting of local agencies, the cities, counties, environmental groups, water districts, that also provided data and input into our project. And we plan on expanding and continuing this level of engagement as we move into the second phase of adaptation. Next slide, please. So the vulnerability assessment identifies a number of key findings. It's a pretty meaty document, about 200 pages, and we cover a variety of asset types, as you can see there on the screen. We cover the traditional assets of people, places, recreation infrastructure, but because of our co-equal goals and our authority, we also look at climate vulnerability impacts to ecosystems and water supply reliability. And also as part of this work, we conducted an equity analysis and created a custom social vulnerability index to identify the most socially vulnerable communities in the Delta to the climate hazards we looked at. So I don't have time to go over these findings in any level of detail or to really go through them all. But what I wanted to do was just to give you, just to whet your appetite a little bit, to give you a very high level key takeaways, to give you an idea what is in the vulnerability assessment and perhaps entice you to look at the document after this meeting. So starting first, first key takeaway from the vulnerability assessment is flooding will continue to get worse in the Delta with climate change. Flooding impacts will continue to affect the central and southern Delta the most, with a concentration in the Stockton area. Flooding in the northern part of the Delta is not expected to be as great of a concern due to the numerous investments that have already been made to the flood system in that area. Secondly, climate change will not impact Delta residents equally. Approximately 65% of the Delta's population could be exposed to the 100-year flood by 2050 and are located in areas with high concentrations of socially vulnerable residents. And vulnerable residents may lack the resources to adequately prepare for flood events. Thirdly, Delta water exports will be less reliable in the future. Climate change will reduce Delta exports in all year types, but impacts will be greater in dry years. Extreme droughts that California experienced in the 2012-2016 timeframe is expected to be 5 to 7 more times likely to occur by 2050. Next, the existing water supply system does not provide enough storage to capture anticipated increases in runoff due to the more variable precipitation and the timing of when that precipitation is expected to occur. In Delta, water users may be threatened by episodic water quality declines. In general, even with up to 2 feet of sea level rise, our results indicate water quality regulations will be able to be maintained in the Delta through 2050. However, Delta water quality has been compromised during droughts in the past, allowing salinity to penetrate further into the Delta. So future droughts may expose more acres of Delta agriculture to more saline water that has historically occurred. Lastly, Delta ecosystems are vulnerable to climate change. No surprise there. By 2085, rising sea levels will cause all critical remaining tidal wetland ecosystems in the Delta to transition to different plant communities or drown completely. Of the ecosystems currently protected by levees, 73% are at risk of flooding due to levee overtopping. And so because of ecological health, the Delta has already compromised, ecosystem resilience to climate change is reduced. So some of those are the high key takeaways of the vulnerability assessment. Like I said, there are many more in the findings in the document, and I encourage you to take a look. Next slide, and this is the last slide for me. The public draft vulnerability assessment is available on the council's web page, and that's the website there. And we have a 60-day public comment period ending on March 16th, and we're taking comments at the email on the screen. So that's it for me. I'm going to turn it back to Laurel for the rest of the lead scientist's report.
Thank you so much.
Could I ask a question briefly? Thank you very much for the presentation. Really great information and a really needed effort to evaluate, what truly are the vulnerabilities that we're seeing as it relates to climate change in the Delta. I I think this is going to be an incredibly helpful document. And of course, my next immediate question is, well, what about the adaptation strategy? Because, proof's in the pudding in terms of the actions that we're actually able to take to impart, change and kind of steer the Delta in a better direction. And so just wondering what the timing or thoughts are as to the adaptation strategy component of this.
Yeah, we're in the midst of internal discussions on what adaptation is going to look like and really scoping the next phase of that project. Likely, we will be engaging in an external stakeholder outreach in the next month or so, just maybe holding a series of meetings, definitely with our technical advisory committee and with all the other major stakeholders that we've been working with over the last 2 years to kind of talk to others and figure out what would be useful given our authorities, what adaptation could look like, and be helpful to other local agencies as well as our state partners. We recognize we can't go at it alone, so it's something that we hope to work with others on. So the timing of that, like I said, external outreach probably over the next month or two, probably take that to our council for direction in the March timeframe, and then we'll start on adaptation shortly after that.
Great, thank you. Appreciate the update and look forward to the ongoing conversation.
I know, thank you for having me.
Again.
Thank you, Harriet. May I have the next slide, please? So I'm going to proceed with some additional reports on the Delta Stewardship Council's recent activities. And I'll start with an update about the Independent Science Board. Next slide. As you probably know, the Independent Science Board is a board of independent science experts tasked with completing reviews, both topical reviews and programmatic reviews, and also providing the Delta Stewardship Council with forward-thinking science and direction. The ISB has been operating in a reduced capacity since the passage of Assembly Bill 5, which impeded our ability to execute contracts with the members. But I am happy to report that at this time, the Independent Science Board members are in the process of becoming employees of the state through the Delta Stewardship Council. This is still somewhat of a transitional period, but in their recent meeting last week, they planned they determined a work plan for 2021 that involves both continuing their ongoing reviews, taking on a limited number of new reviews. They know, for instance, that they will be reviewing the science action agenda in the fall, and then continuing work on the DPIC science needs assessment. They are also introducing a new element to their work plan in 2021. Their meetings will shift from a monthly meeting format to a 2-meeting per month format. The first meeting of the month is going to be focused on these ongoing and planned reviews and ongoing work that they have typically done. And then the second meeting will focus on exploring forward-looking science. So how do we make forward-looking science actionable? This second meeting of the month will take the format of seminars and panels and reviews, and they do plan to engage with agency scientists, with stakeholders in the community to really look at what needs to be done, what the priority of managers are, and what their ideas are for looking into the future. So the initial topic that they will be tackling in their forward-looking science part of their work plan will be harmful algal blooms, which I know is a topic of huge interest within the Water Board right now. So there will be opportunities to have a productive engagement with Independent Science Board through these meetings, and you can expect that they will reach out to you as well. And then just to mention some of their ongoing reviews that are in their work plan in 2021. They're continuing work on their non-native species ecosystems review, the water supply reliability review, and the monitoring enterprise review. And as I mentioned before, they expect to review the process of the science action agenda in the fall. Next slide, please. I'm going to say a little bit more now about the Science Action Agenda and highlight progress in developing the 2022 to 2026 version of the Science Action Agenda for the Delta. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Science Action Agenda, this is a key pillar to our Delta science strategy, as illustrated in this infographic, that plays a critical role in advancing our vision of One Delta, One Science. In other words, an open Delta science community that works together to build a common body of scientific knowledge. Additional aspects of our science strategy are the State of Bay Delta Science, which reports on current understanding within the system, and then the Delta Science Plan, which occupies that planning circle at the top of the infographic. The Science Action Agenda itself identifies critical science actions that inform the most pressing management challenges, and it's developed collaboratively with extensive stakeholder input in the Delta Science Program. The Delta Stewardship Council and partners and stakeholders can then use the Science Action Agenda and its key elements, which I'll discuss next, in order to undertake science that's management relevant, foster and facilitate scientific collaborations and partnerships, prioritize science investments, such as the proposals that we fund through our proposal solicitation, and also to communicate the value of science and the enterprise's ability to work collaboratively. Next slide. So we are roughly halfway through our collaborative process of producing this 2022 to 2026 Science Action Agenda. And we especially want to thank the State Water Board and its affiliated bodies for your engagement in the Science Action Agenda. The Science Action Agenda is organized by broader management needs, management questions, and science actions. What's different about this iteration of the Science Action Agenda is that we started by soliciting management questions from the broader Delta community in order to ensure that the science actions we identify are relevant to addressing managers' needs. So as you can see from this timeline, we started with close to 1,300 management questions. And just recently, following a series of surveys and a workshop, we've distilled those questions down to 65 top management questions. And those were recently published online. You could find them on the Delta, link from the Delta Stewardship Council webpage. Now, the next steps are to identify broader thematic management needs in order to group those management questions, and then ultimately to identify the science actions that are most relevant to those management questions and themes. Next slide. So for those of you who are interested, here is a snapshot of the top 5 ranked questions from our list of 65. In the actual list, and you could get to the list by following the link at the bottom of the slide. So in that actual list, the relevant management themes are listed next to each of the questions. Those at the top of the list hit on more themes than those at the bottom of the list. So what we wanted to do was really emphasize the most cross-cutting questions and those rated high by workshop participants. So hopefully that gives you a better feel for what we've accomplished recently and what the next steps are in updating the Science Action Agenda. And again, thank you for your continued participation in this process. Next slide. The next thing I want to provide an update on is the 2021 proposal solicitation. We accepted letters of intent in mid-December, and I'm happy to report that we received 134 letters of intent with $78 million in requested funds. So this is almost a doubling of the funding request from the 2019 solicitation, and I think it illustrates the elevated visibility and urgency of doing Delta science. These letters of intent were for 115 different research projects. And as I mentioned in my last update, we now have a program within the proposal solicitation that emphasizes projects for integrated socio-ecological systems studies. So these are larger projects that involve collaboration of multiple institutions and across multiple disciplines. And 19 of the letters of intent that we received were for these integrated socio-ecological systems projects. The next steps are that the proposals are due on February 12th, which is just around the corner. And then we will engage in a peer review and panel evaluation process before making the funding awards. For those of you who might be involved in putting together these proposals, I just wanted to call your attention to an FAQ document that was released on the Delta Stewardship Council website in December, and it summarizes all of the questions that have been received about the proposal solicitation process. Next slide, please. I'm just going back to the infographic for the Delta Science Strategy, and I'm going to transition into discussing progress on an update to State of Bay Delta Science, which I'll just remind you is this reporting tier of the Delta Science Strategy. Next slide. So in my October report, I mentioned that we are updating State of Bay Delta Science. This is for our 2022 update that is in the works. I also mentioned that we're moving away from a mode of reviewing relevant science across a broad range of topics for State of Bay Delta Science update. What we'll see in the future is more frequent State of Bay Delta Science updates, about every 2 years, each of which is focused on a theme. And the theme of the 2022 update will be ecosystem services and disservices of Bay Delta primary producers. In other words, how plants and algae affect ecosystems and respond to management of the estuary and its watershed. The latest update is that we've identified authors for the different chapters of this update, and I have some tentative titles here shown here so that you could be aware of what we will be reporting on. One of the chapters will be focused on historical ecology of primary production in the San Francisco estuary. We'll also have chapters on invasion processes and ecosystem engineering of invasive species, exploring a way forward for management of those aquatic invasive macrophytes, emerging methods for studying primary producers from macrophytes to microalgae. And this really has a focus on remote sensing methods and applications within the Delta. There's also a chapter on HABs, so cyanobacteria and harmful algal blooms. And finally, a chapter on carbon sequestration and subsidence reversal, which of course will be one of the essential elements to adapting to sea level rise within the Delta that Harriet talked about. Next slide, please. We have a few upcoming workshops that should be on your radar. One coming up right around the corner, February 17th through 19th, is a workshop that's focused on monitoring steelhead populations in the San Joaquin Basin. Now, this workshop supports the biological opinion on long-term operation of the Central Valley Plan and State Water Project, which aims to develop a plan to monitor steelhead populations within the San Joaquin Basin and or the San Joaquin River, downstream of the confluence of the Stanislaus River. And this includes steelhead and rainbow trout on non-project San Joaquin tributaries as well. The agenda is now up on the Delta Stewardship Council webpage. You could find it under the events tab. Just briefly, the themes that we'll focus on in the agenda are management challenges. So we're going to look to out-of-basin monitoring to inform within basin monitoring strategies. Many stakeholders will be engaged and reporting on this day of the workshop. The second day will be focused on monitoring, so identifying top priorities, determining what's already being monitored within this area. And then the third day will have more of an analytical focus. So in other words, what does a balanced sampling framework look like given the extreme spatial and temporal variability present within the Delta, and also the size of the Sacramento and San Joaquin watersheds? What tools are needed in order to make a regional monitoring plan successful? This workshop is free. It is completely virtual. I think that goes without saying at this point, but you do need to register for it. So if you're interested in attending, visit the events tab on the Delta Stewardship Council webpage to find a link to registration. Next slide, please. In the immediate future is the Adaptive Management Forum, which begins tomorrow and runs through the end of the week. This is something that we are all very excited about. When the Independent Science Board did its review of adaptive management within the Delta back in 2016, one of their recommendations was to hold a regular adaptive management forum in which scientists and managers within the whole Delta Science enterprise can engage in a discussion of adaptive management, its past, its present, and its future. So that's what we will be doing during the Adaptive Management Forum. Registration, unfortunately, has closed already. However, if you have missed registration, it will be possible to follow the events of this forum on social media using the hashtag AMForum2021. So focuses of the Adaptive Management Forum will be on synthesizing lessons learned from previous ecosystem restoration and water management projects and research efforts. Another focus will be education. How do we better share information about adaptive management? There will be a networking component to this meeting. And then another goal will be to stimulate dialogue around a shared vision of adaptive management. Next slide. So what you'll see is that we are attempting to accomplish these multifold objectives by including various formats and forums within the adaptive management meeting. So in addition to standard talks, you'll also see lightning talks, you'll see some panel discussions, and then the afternoon is focused on having breakout groups that in turn are focused on particular topics such as adaptive management planning. There's going to be an overview of the Delta Landscape Scenario Planning tool, which is a great tool for putting together scenarios for looking at the future within the community. So next slide, please. So one of the essential components to actualizing adaptive management is data integration. And I know this is something that the Water Board is making a lot of progress on. How do we make our data sets more transparent? And one of the things I'm interested in particular as lead scientist is how do we better match real-time data availability with these performance measures that we have within the Delta plan. Right now, the Delta Stewardship Council has a performance measures dashboard on their webpage. There's a screenshot on the right-hand side of the slide showing the status of meeting performance measures for dissolved oxygen over the past 5 or 7 years. I think one of the things I would like to accomplish as lead scientist would be to upgrade this performance measures dashboard and have it linked to real-time sources of data, and then link that in turn to modeling resources that might integrate this data into generating projections or even real-time forecasting. This is something that the Independent Science Board is also very interested in adopting with their forward-looking science sessions. So there's a great interest right now within the Delta Stewardship Council to lay the foundation for near real-time forecasting relevant to management goals. This is something that I'm hoping to engage with the Water Board on moving forward.
Dr. Larson, on that, I just have to then chime in. I really agree completely that we need a better synthesis of the data that we're collecting in more real-time ways. It is a topic of discussion in the context of AB 1755, the Open Water Data Act, where the state has really taken a federated approach to some of this work, where we're focusing on trying to create the sorts of APIs that advanced programming interfaces that allow for easy integration into tools like this, so that you're scraping from the authoritative data set, whether it's at the board, it's Fish and Wildlife, Stewardship Council, Department of Water Resources, whoever the curator of that data set is, really allowing it to be interoperable. So it kind of, again, federates the various systems that we have. So it's less about trying to find that one database to rule them all, and more ensuring the interoperability amongst them to create the sorts of dashboards and analytics like this. irrespective of kind of who owns the data or has custody, which is important for the QA/QC portion, for being able to have updated data. We're a long way from a really perfected system, but I think that there's ways that we could, in the next year, continue to focus in on, okay, well, where is the space for projects? The Water Data Consortium is a nonprofit that's been stood up as well, that is starting to have resources to put to some of these projects. I think that, coming hand in hand, State Water Board, Delta Stewardship Council, and our other state agencies, with just understanding the opportunities to start to take advantage of whatever APIs are already out there, or which ones we need to prioritize amongst our data sets to really get to this better decision making, I think that we're all collectively trying to do with these data systems. But it's a little scattershot, I feel sometimes, but I think the passion and the intent is certainly there.
That's really great to hear. And that's a nice segue into the next thing that I was going to say, which is that user communities will also drive the development of these tools. And one user community that I believe the Water Board has substantial involvement in is the Integrated Modeling Steering Committee, which is working to form a virtual collaboratory in order to make models used for projecting and planning within the Delta interoperable. And a part of that interoperability will also be making those models interoperable with data sources and doing better data assimilation. And so I am really enthusiastic about working with that group and working collaboratively across agencies to lay this foundation that I speak of. And I think there are also possible connections here to needs to do real-time forecasting-based reservoir operations beyond the Delta. And also, I think this also engages with the initiative to do environmental flow operations, which requires that near real-time data assimilation as well. So I just wanted to mention that as an area of development and an exciting area for collaboration with the Water Board. Next slide, please. And then going back to reporting on ongoing meetings, the other thing that's on your radar right now is the 11th Biennial Bay Delta Science Conference, which will occur April 6th through 9th in a fully virtual format. The theme of this meeting is building resilience through diversity in science. We have the abstract deadline has already passed. And again, the number of abstracts that we receive reflects the growing visibility of Delta science and the growing interest in Delta science. We received about twice as many abstracts as we actually have speaking slots for. But an upcoming deadline that might be of interest to some in the audience is we're accepting proposals for Delta relevant art, which are due February 12th. The Bay Delta Science Conference has, for the past several iterations, done a really nice integration of art and science. And I think this is something that makes what we do a little more accessible to the community and a broader range of people. So check the council website soon for a registration link for this conference. It's not up yet, but it will be in the near future. Next slide. So one of the things that I wanted to report on that's related to the Bay Delta Science Conference is an initiative that's being undertaken by Dr. Jessica Rudnick. She is a recent hire of the Delta Stewardship Council. She's actually employed as a California Sea Grant Extension Specialist to work with the council. She was hired as an outcome of the Social Science Task Force report. And she was hired with the purpose of helping us to achieve some of these goals of better integrating social science throughout all aspects of the Delta Science enterprise. Jess came on board in December and has really hit the ground running with generating ideas and a work plan for actually actualizing some of these goals. She holds a PhD from the University of California, Davis, where she was affiliated with the Center for Environmental Policy and Behavior. And I had her prepare this slide for you to illustrate some of the goals that she has, which include collecting and synthesizing existing data and research efforts on human dimensions of the Delta, developing a conceptual framework for social elements of the Delta to identify or to aid in identifying key knowledge gaps, and doing coordinated doing a coordinated establishment of longitudinal monitoring of social well-being indicators. The other thing she would like to do is to build a supportive and coordinated network of academic, government, and civil service, social scientists, and practitioners in order to mobilize long-term and larger scale social science research and practice. So essentially, she wants to form a research coordination network, which she plans to kick off at the Bay Delta Science Conference. She'll host a kickoff networking event as part of that meeting. It's going to be a 2-hour event. We're still trying to find the exact time slot within the meeting agenda. But the objective will be to bring together Bay Delta Science practitioners, attendees, and other interested social scientists and practitioners in order to get to know each other. She's going to facilitate a discussion to gauge interest in participating in a longer-term research coordination network. She wants to gather input on the community's goals, understand represented areas of expertise, and gather some recommendations from the participants. So there will be more details announced soon in the Bay Delta Science Conference agenda, or you could contact Dr. Rudnick directly using the email address that is showing on the slide. Another thing that might be of interest is that Jessica is going to initiate a social science brown bag seminar series that will be co-hosted by the Delta Stewardship Council and California Sea Grant. So stay tuned to social media and listservs to find an announcement of this series in the upcoming future. So with that, I think I am out of my time. I will postpone my spotlight on other articles for the next quarterly report. But I wanted to make sure that you had a chance to hear from Dr. Ross on this very important vulnerability report that was just put out, and also to report on these other activities of interest. So I would welcome any questions that you have, and I'm happy to also chat further offline.
Thank you so much, Dr. Larson. It's really, there's an incredible amount of work going on. And it's great to hear that there's such interest in the biannual conference, and that it really does speak to, I think, the opportunities that we have to continue to draw the best and brightest minds to the sticky wicket that is the Delta for us, but I think in ways that are moving us generationally here into a better discussion and a better understanding ultimately of what are some of the solutions, and the adaptation strategy is really appreciated in all of this work. The vulnerability and adaptation strategies here are helping focus what is a lot of science to synthesize, and a lot of then decision making for all of us to then contemplate as to what it means for how will we be managing the Delta into the decades ahead. And truly, maybe for the first time, actually managing it, as opposed to sort of just watching its unfortunate decline. So thank you. Thank you. I don't think I have too much question, just otherwise, thanks. And I think for me, certainly the discussion around our data systems, how to continue to improve their interoperability, how it then adds up into these analytical tools and the decision-making discussions that we all have is really critical. We need to better emphasize that data enterprise, if you will, in a way that starts to move us toward better decision-making and not just better data gathering. So, but thank you. And so I would be open to having further discussion there, just thoughts generally, but I think it really is looking across the landscape here, and there are many opportunities, organizations to really figure out what are the best projects we need to be focusing on. What do we as state agencies need to focus on? What does that free up academia and our nonprofit groups out there to then layer on? And I think look forward to just trying to better figure that all out amongst ourselves here, because I think that there are an incredible amount of opportunities out there. And I would even flag, particularly working through the Water Quality Monitoring Council, which is, as you know, a very helpful assemblage between the California Natural Resources Agency and Cali PA. And again, these kind of cross-agency projects are really critical for so many of our discussions. Fellow board members, thoughts, questions?
I would just say thank you. I find this so valuable and exciting, and I'll be following up to try to get some more in-depth briefings because there's so much here to dig into, and I'm relatively new to Bay Delta work, so I have a big learning curve and appreciate all of the I really value these quarterly briefings. They're really helpful and exciting.
Thank you. And I am happy to follow up with you and provide you with further briefings. Look forward to meeting you.
Sorry, and just one more thought is just to say I really am excited about the all the directions that you pointed out and just really practical tools and research areas that intersect all of these really important questions. And I also am excited about the social science piece and sort of community engagement to get folks more involved. So thank you.
Board Member Firestone stole my thunder. That was actually what I was going to mention. In addition to everything else that the chair and Member Firestone has mentioned, I really am very impressed and so inspired by the efforts that you've made to engage the community and your focus on collaboration and integrating the science aspect of all of this. So thank you for doing that effort.
Thank you.
I'll just echo the accolades and, thank you. I've really enjoyed these conversations, these updates. They're so important to our work. And, in that vein, I am, as we go forward here, just, you've gone through the process of identifying top management questions and working on the science action agenda in so many different areas. And so for me, our planning processes take years, many, many years. So by the time we get to the end, sometimes there's a perception that maybe the science is outdated, or there's newer science that's evolving kind of in real time as our planning processes go on. So just flag, maybe a conversation with you offline, just how do we get better at integrating that science and keeping it more up to date with those types of management questions that invariably keep popping up and are persisting and are challenges we're facing in the Delta. So I'm sure you're thinking that way as well, and just really would be interested to hear your thoughts. So thank you.
Yes, the Independent Science Board is drafting a report on how we actually can do forward-looking science and what's the need for forward-looking science within the Delta. And one of the points that they make in that, and also in their adaptive management review back in 2016, is that it is challenging to actualize nimble science within a science enterprise that includes many different agencies, that is constrained by many different regulations and laws. And so, I think this is actually going to be a topic of discussion at the Adaptive Management Forum. How do we operate within these institutional constraints, and how do we work with these institutional constraints in order to overcome some of these barriers to rapidly integrating the science that's developing and the conditions that are developing on the ground with policy making and decisions.
Absolutely.
I'd also like to step in for a moment on the issue that you raised, Member McGuire, because this science enterprise, as we've all heard today and have heard in the past from our lead scientist, continues to evolve, and the benefit to the state board, one of the many benefits, in addition to just understanding what's going on, being better informed, improving the quality of our input and regulatory involvement, this really does give us a body of accepted science that is continually evolving, but has all this collaboration, all the different interconnections, and gives us the opportunity to reduce the sense of reliance on what is inevitably considered combat science if it comes just from the state board or just from one interest group or another. So this benefit of synthesis, of outreach, of involvement gives us continually a scientific basis on which to found our regulatory responses and to meet our responsibilities for water quality, for water supply, for water allocation, for all of those things. So I think, as Dr. Larson has illustrated today, there's an enormous amount that's going on. But for the first time, really, certainly in my experience, through the Stewardship Council, we are making real progress to one science, which is going to be beneficial for all of us.
Hear, hear.
Thank you very much for those comments. I have a lot more to say about this, and I will say more about this when I present a talk on Friday as part of the Adaptive Management Forum. So I would really like to have this conversation with more of you moving forward, and I'm happy to share the transcript of the talk with all of you after the fact.
That would be great. Really do appreciate that. Yeah, it's, 12 years on or so since the Delta Reform Act and the creation of the Delta Stewardship Council, and this space that we have. And to our Delta Water Master here, Mr. George's point, I really do feel we're hitting a stride and have a space and opportunity here to get some good work into place and to kind of move past what has been really feeling like the last 20 plus years of kind of lack of inertia, really. And so appreciate that. We actually have a few folks for comment on this item, so we can start to take through some of their thoughts. And first, I'd like to call up Roger Mammon. Mr. Mammon, you should be invited here momentarily to unmute and or share your camera.
It does appear that Mr. Mammon has unmuted, but just in case, Mr. Mammon, there are multiple ways often in Zoom in order to speak. In the lower left corner, you should have a little audio icon and then an up arrow next to it. If you click on that, you may be able to switch your input source.
And if you're speaking clearly, Mr. Mammon, we still can't hear you.
So, Mr. Mammon, if you continue to have problems and you are interested in speaking, I know you had filled out your card originally indicating that you were just if necessary, but go ahead and send an email to either, send an email to commentletters@waterboards.ca.gov, or if you can, just reply to the email that you had received from the clerk of the board providing the Zoom credentials for this meeting, and let us know if you'd still like to participate, and we can try to assist you with that. Chair Esquivel, I would probably just go on to the next speaker at this point.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Loffer. Let's do so. So I believe it's Tria Blue Wakpa.
And both Ms. Wakpa and Ms. Gold have departed the Zoom meeting. I believe that they actually may have intended to speak on during the public forum Bay Delta item, but they had registered for this item.
Yeah, and apologies to that, Ms. Gould and Ms. Wakpa. And for those whoever, in filling out the speaker card, you can select which item you would like to speak, or public forum is one of those as well. So if you intended to speak during the tranching public forum, apologize we didn't get to you then. Then we'll go to Jane Perry. Good morning, Ms. Perry.
Hi, good morning. I'm Dr. Jane Perry. I'm a retired researcher and teacher at UC Berkeley and a member of 1,000 Grandmothers for Future Generations. And I'm speaking about improved water flows. They're needed to restore the healthy salmon runs, and the science shows, as your work has confirmed, that inadequate flow standards are the driver of the collapse of the Bay Delta fish species. The state board is the only agency with the authority and legal responsibility to provide enough water flow in our rivers to keep the salmon healthy. And I encourage the board to act now to require adequate flows to protect the salmon and all Bay Delta species, and the indigenous cultures and sovereignty that are linked to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Perry. Much appreciated. And actually, I believe that wraps up who we have on the platform here that was slated to speak for public forum. Is that correct, Mr. Luffer?
That is correct, although it looks like Mr. Mammon has now called in, so I'm going to offer him the opportunity to unmute his phone.
Mr. Mammon, good morning. Can you hear us?
Hello.
Hello, good. Yes, we can hear you.
Fantastic. I want to just say that how do I get rid of this
You may need
feedback?
to, on your computer, turn the sound off, mute it on the computer, and just rely on the phone at this point.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, that's better. Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Mammon.
Good morning. I just wanted to state that I'm the president of the West Delta chapter of the California Striped Bass Association. And, you know, I tried calling in earlier during the public forum, but I wasn't very successful at it. But I want to thank the Water Board for listening to all the public comments. And I want to state that our fisheries are in trouble because of the lack of flows in the Delta. And I've testified before the board before. Dr. Dudak was the chair at the time. And, you know, it seems like our concerns have always been ignored by the State Water Resources Control Board. The Delta needs water. I live in Oakley. I'm concerned about the harmful algal blooms. Big Break is in Oakley. They had to, East Bay Regional Parks had to close their kayak launch facilities because of the HABs. And it's time to take action. Waiting any longer is not the solution. Something has to be done to restore the flows, the natural flows of our rivers. And I encourage you to take the Delta plan and run with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mammon. I appreciate your comments and your time today. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, I think that wraps up comments for the item. Still appropriate. Certainly, you know, this entire science enterprise around the Delta, continuing to inform better management decisions and how we as a board continue to use it to balance what are the many beneficial uses of water within the state and continue to try to do better at that balancing is really critical. And so I just appreciate everyone's comments from today. And Dr. Larson, particularly to you for your incredibly informative item here. Again, just really looking forward to your tenure as lead scientist here, and already just very impressed by the synthesis here, the continued opportunity to help us understand the work that's going on at the Delta Stewardship Council, and importantly, how it all fits within this framework of decision-making and agencies amongst us. And just thank you. I'm just very appreciative for your continued work here, and look forward to further discussion around this.
Thank you for the time, Chair Esquivel.
Well, thank you. And I think with that, wraps up, unless board members, any other comment, thoughts, anything further to leave with? Okay, well then that wraps up our item. And again, thank you both to Dr. Ross and Dr. Larson here. And let me quickly, well, the only thing left on our agenda item here is actually board member reports. And so we can move to those here now. Anyone particularly would like to start here as I pull up my calendar as well?
I can start. I have been able to do lots of talks between the last board meeting and now. I spoke with a couple, with the Stanford class around Sigma and human right to water with former chair Marcus, which was fun. I was able to speak with CMUA on their Capital Day, particularly around affordability and a wide array of affordability challenges, including the COVID survey responses. and that was with Commissioner Aceves Guzman and Senator Dodd. And spoke with the UC Davis Law Clinic, which is working with communities as a legal technical assistance provider within the SAFER program. So talked a bit about the SAFER program and kind of background on the issues that the clinic works on. I was able to talk with the Aqua Board, which was on a variety of subjects that they asked about, but also just kind of introducing myself more and talking about priorities and areas that I highlighted were data, collaborations, and trying to get more robust data and reporting and continued improvements in our relationship around that, as well as funding advocacy jointly and collaboratively, and just thinking about a wide array of funding options that we could be looking at. And then I was able to be, I was keynote speaker for the Water Law Symposium on the 30th, which was really about climate change. And so I was able to talk about kind of the challenges we have overall in the state, particularly disproportionate impacts, and how climate change will exacerbate those. And also just then work that people are doing, including the board, on sort of a wide variety of aspects of this, including a lot around water quality. And, you know, there's so much, pretty much everything the board does is incorporating, you know, how we go through and adapt to our programs to climate change. And then talked a bit about just approaches for ensuring that as we do that, we're incorporating and furthering equity. And so that was overview of, for some reason, a ton of speaking engagements the last 2 weeks, which were really fun. And yeah, so that's my update.
That's great. Yeah, I think, you know, now that we're kind of moving into the year, folks are starting to calendar various engagements. I had a few, I'll just note, the 21st was with the Northern California Power Agency. They're a group of a consortium of locally owned electric utilities, and had a good discussion around the energy water nexus, and 401 water quality certifications were certainly of mind for folks. But then also, you know, the important nexus even of efficiency and the energy savings that we have, and just how this all fits together, or increasingly, you know, how we're trying to fit it together in our thinking at the board. So that was a welcomed opportunity. I appreciated that. And then looks like, yep, last Wednesday, Rick Frank from UC Davis Environmental Law, his speaker series, which is actually kind of tied to somewhat I think the Water Law Symposium is the student-led kind of component there, and it's one, we're incredibly fortunate for UC Davis, and they're always a great collaboration on all the challenges that the board faces. So was able to speak at his the speaking series, the California Environmental Law Policy Speaker Series, on that Wednesday, the 27th. And so I think covered many of the same topics, and made sure to make a plug for board member Firestone's keynote speak on Saturday. So yeah, that was Wednesday the 27th. And then just this past Monday morning was with the San Diego County, it's the San Diego Council of Water Utilities. And so that was a good engagement, always great to connect with folks down in San Diego. And so those were the three speaking engagements I sort of had there.
Sadly, no speaking engagements for me these last 2 weeks. maybe I'm okay with that. But I just wanted to flag that Friday was the Sacramento River Science Partnership and the Water Board staff and the Bureau of Reclamation and numerous others had a session on Sacramento River temperature modeling. It was very well attended. I believe, I don't know if Chair Esquivel, maybe you were there, and maybe other board members. But I just want to flag that, you know, obviously it's a very complicated issue. In fact, there's multiple models looking at different aspects of temperature management just on Shasta itself. And so not to get into all the details, just to flag that I was really encouraged by the conversation, the openness and transparency about the work, the modeling work that has been done in the past that's utilized today for making management decisions, and then future updates to models that will help, you know, better understand those, you know, tough trade-offs that need to be made. So just really encouraged by that conversation. And I know there's another meeting this week on Thursday looking at temperature dependent mortality. And so, you know, again, just a continuation of those different issues that are ongoing and challenges year in and year out. So just wanted to let everyone know in case you weren't aware.
Thank you, board member.
Well, I actually had a speaking engagement. I spoke last Thursday at the Planning and Conservations League Assembly, and I was on a panel of 4 speakers. The session focused on our Bay Delta Water Quality Control Plan update. And in particular, I think what troubled me is it focused on the perception that the voluntary agreements will replace our standard setting process for the Bay Delta. So in my remarks, I focused on 2 particular points. One, I pointed out that Action 18.2 in the water resilience portfolio is actually to complete the Water Quality Control Plan update and implement the plan potentially through voluntary agreements, which I think is a clear indication of this administration and this board's commitment to completing that task. Then secondly, I also emphasize that approval of any proposed voluntary agreements is not automatic. And in fact, this board will need to make an independent decision as to whether or not any proposal would reasonably protect beneficial uses. And we will do that in a public process in which I encouraged everyone to participate. I got the feeling then, and it was emphasized by our public forum speakers today, that I don't think I provided much reassurance to those who are concerned about, you know, the lack of progress they perceived on the Water Quality Control Plan update. And I bring this up, and I realize that we can't discuss it today because it's not on the agenda. But, you know, as you know, I am not paired with any of you on this issue. So this is the only forum during which I may, you know, communicate my thoughts. So if you would allow me to do that. You know, first of all, I've been very proud of the work that we've done. Sure, I think we all would wish to move faster, but this is a complicated issue. There's a lot of different factors, science, policy, there's a lot of balancing involved. And I appreciate that the board is part of the administration's team, and we don't want to get ahead. We want to support the agency secretaries who have been working so hard to lead this voluntary agreement discussions. And we definitely don't want to get ahead of the governor's office on, you know, such an important decision such as when and how to proceed. I respect all that. I think that is part of our charge as being a board that is part of the executive branch of government here in California. But it has been 2 years since we as a board touched this topic, and there's a lot of angst out there. I think there's also a lot of misunderstanding, a lot of misconception about what's happening. And so with all that in mind, I'm requesting not an action item, because I know there's a lot more that needs to be done before this board can take an action, but an informational item to be scheduled in 2 weeks or as soon as possible thereafter. I'd like to hear a report from our staff on their progress on on the various directives that we gave them in December of 2018 and their progress in developing documents for phase 2. I think we need to do this just as part of the transparency that is so fundamental to our being a board. But I think we also need to do this because of the 2 points that I emphasized to the Planning and Conservation League on Thursday. One, it supports the governor's Resilient Portfolio Action 18.2, which is to complete the update and implement the plan. And secondly, I think it hopefully will reassure everyone who is concerned of something that I know to be true for each of us, and that is we take our responsibilities very seriously, especially our responsibility in the Delta. And we also take very seriously our charge to exercise independent judgment on a matter for which we, the board, not Cal EPA, not the resources agency, but we, the board, are directly responsible for under state and federal law. So I strongly encourage that we do this. As been mentioned earlier today, I am not seeking a fifth term on the board. And it's been a tremendous honor and privilege. And I will say that my biggest regret is that I will not be here with you when this board take action on the water quality control plan update. I surely had hoped that we could do so during my term on the board. And as you know, my term officially ended on January 15th. So I am on borrowed time, as they say, with respect to being on this board. So I sincerely ask, plead that we have this informational item on our progress to implement phase 1 and to update and implement phase 2 on the Bay Delta Water Quality Control Plan before I leave the board. It would mean so much to me. And so with that, I thank you, and I hope that we're able to get to it. If not the next board meeting, then perhaps the one after that in March.
One, I just really have to acknowledge your incredible leadership and time on this board, Board Member Dodek, Tam. I know that it was kind of brought out here in public that you were not seeking reappointment through the public forum, and so appropriately, I just want to make sure, and first and foremost, just thank you for your incredible integrity and work through all these years. The Water Quality Control Plan update is a 10+ year project before this board still. And but to your point, we need to continue to provide clarity and just be able to communicate where we are and how we continue to proceed in the time ahead. And hopeful that we'll continue to certainly have discussion, but need to have that touch point here soon. It has been 2 years, and but it hasn't been 2 years, to your point, without great engagement and work from this board around not just the voluntary agreements as they're being led by the secretaries, but the water quality control plan itself and the continuum of work that is, and that these aren't two separate things. That to your point, the VAs will ultimately come before the board and be an assessment of us here, and that it is the continuity of the effort between the passage of here now phase 1, the continued work on phase 2, and the opportunities to see for the first time, we really get serious about our challenges in the Delta and not repeat the mistakes of the Cal Fed and previous negotiations, which really, I think, undercut or undersold really what we needed to do. And so we're all here to keep the effort cogent, alive, and just want to acknowledge and thank your comments here. Yes, it's not an item before us, so not really appropriate for us to be going too much back and forth here, but your comments are certainly accepted and welcome. And I thank you for, again, an incredible tenure on this board, Tam, and just we'll continue to work here in the time ahead, knowing that you are on borrowed time, and I want to squeeze out as much if we can as from you in that borrowed time, because these aren't positions that are easily filled, and they're not easily, I will say, the work can be very difficult. And your years of leadership here have really provided a good basis for the board's future and continued good work. So just thank you. But I think that, well, actually, no, Board Member McGuire, I don't think we heard from you yet, or did we? Yes, we did. I apologize. Kind of in my moment with Board Member Dodek here. Okay, well, that concludes Board Member reports. And I really do thank everyone for their time today. We'll see you all here in 2 weeks then. And unless there's anything else that needs to be said before we close here, Mr. Lawfer, I'll just say to everyone, just thank you, have an incredible week. And this meeting is then adjourned.